Since we're on a tight hour, and I know that we have an awful lot of interesting topics to cover. Welcome. I think I know most people, but this is, I'm David Audrin, CEO of SISO. I am very pleased to introduce this topic today. Liz Irving is with Clarion Events and chair of SISO's Marketing Special Interest Group, and has brought together a great group and topic for today. So I'm, without further ado, going to hand it over. Just from a housekeeping perspective, if you have questions, please use the chat box. This is an open discussion format, not a webinar. So we're using the chat box if you have questions, and Liz will call on you or just ask the questions. If you have any other requests and things, also just use the chat, and Anna and I will be happy to try and accommodate those. But with that, Liz, happy to hand it over to you and your panel. Please get.
Okay, thanks, David. And hi, everyone. I'm Liz Irving with Clarion Events, and I'm just thrilled to be here today with these amazing panelists. I'll have them introduce themselves in just a minute, but I wanted to also welcome you to the first Marketing SIG event, and we're really excited to be getting back to a live environment. So there's so much to talk about with marketing. So please be sure to give us feedback on this session, but also talk to us about topics you'd like to see us do in the future around the Marketing SIG. So in a minute, we'll talk about virtual and digital events. So it's been a crazy year for all of us, and I think the digital world has been really a catalyst for us over the last year. And in my opinion, it's been really eye-opening for marketers. The new audiences we've learned from digital, we're unlocking new data points, but we've also had access to things we've never had before. And of course, we've had some bumps in the road. So today's panel has a great representation of marketers, event organizers, and data minds. We're going to share with you some of the most insightful approaches they're using in their business today. So let's introduce them. So let's start with Jess. Can you tell us more, Jess, about what your last year has looked like, and a little bit more about what your marketing structure looks like today in the business?
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad that we're talking about this topic. I know it's been front of mind for us. I oversee the events at Marijuana Business Daily. So our large annual event is MJ BizCon in Las Vegas each year for cannabis professionals. What has our last year been like? Wow, probably similar to everybody else's, right? We made the shift to digital events for our two largest events. Our smaller conferences around the world, we unfortunately weren't able to go forward with. But it has brought up some really interesting things when we're looking at data, both on our audience side as well as our client side, and what their needs are for getting back to in person. We are planning to go forward with a hybrid event in October of this year. So now we're taking kind of what we learned in the, pre-COVID in-person data strategy and how we're doing marketing there, and we're kind of marrying that with everything that we learned last year. Which, COVID years, I feel like it was 1 year, but it really felt like it was more like 10. So my marketing team, though, we've actually recently gone through a restructure to address some of the things that came out of it. We have broken up into audience development marketers that are heavily focused in our media arm. So filling the top of the funnel, newsletter signups, things like that. And then we have show marketers that are, obviously responsible for marketing the show, and then client side demand gen marketers who are responsible for supporting our sales team. We also have a data analyst that supports the IT team across the entire company.
Awesome, thanks, Jess. Over to Amy with Informa.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Allen with Informa Markets, and I happen to work across a wide variety of product groups within Informa, so not one particular portfolio. And the last year has definitely looked very different, obviously, for everybody. But within Informa Markets, we've been sort of a hybrid approach, not necessarily in terms of events, but similar to what Jess was saying. So we're in a flux, if you will. With some of our groups, we're strictly trade show only groups. And then we have other arms of the company that were multimedia groups. So trade shows, publications, digital products already. So we happen to be in a place where some of the groups were a little bit more advanced than others in terms of how they came along. So the last year has really definitely seen the launch of quite a few hybrid events. And in terms of structure of staffing, similar to where everyone was at in stages of types of product offerings that they had to begin with, similar situation for marketing roles. So Scott Sherpy with Informa, who happens to be on the call today as well, he heads up our marketing special interest group within Informa Markets North America, and I head up our data and insights special interest group within North America. And Scott's actually been working with the marketers pretty closely recently on what a structure look like going forward, right? So similar to what Jess was describing, we're seeing a lot of need for a change in data analysts now as part of the marketing team. We haven't really had that before. We had a lot of marketing generalists, content marketing being a huge part of that going forward. So there's definitely a shift in the type of talent needed, going away from marketing generalists and looking more specifically at types of roles around data going forward.
Great, well, thanks, Amy. And John.
Yeah, so hi. We are a niche publication, trade show, digital media company to B2B. We help hospitals match providers of medical equipment, product, services with the users of the equipment. And we took a little different approach last year. We postponed a show that was in California in April of 2020. And we basically said, let's do 3 regional meetings. So we actually held 4 live person meetings from August till the end of the year last year. And we just finished a large event last week in Dallas. So our revenue streams are mostly from the advertiser, sponsor, vendor avenue. So we did whatever we could to show value to them. So there's, I guess, a fine line between brave and crazy, but we went ahead with live events, and we were pretty successful with it.
Brave and crazy, I like that actually, and I even like more that we're returning to live events. So guys, let's kind of dive right in. So it's been a year of development, kind of rethinking all of our business approaches, and of course the introduction more of what digital and virtual can offer our customer base and our organizations. So I'm curious to hear from each of you how your event marketing needs have changed with the intro of a stronger arm of virtual technology. And as we're getting back to live events, what are you considering now that will be business critical for you as you go into 2021? So John, let's start with you on that question.
Yeah, so we definitely needed to help the attendance as much as possible. So what can we use for technology to help that with the live events we were doing? So we came up with some ideas to pivot, and we actually started recording all of our educational sessions so that we get more eyeballs on those recordings post-show, and then share those names of the attendees with the sponsor of either the event or that particular educational session. So that was really good to get more attendance, even though it might be virtual, to share with that. We certainly were looking at ways the sponsors could also get more value. So we were doing videos for introductions to events if they couldn't be there live because of travel restrictions. So those are just a few of the things we did to kind of get creative with technology and live events.
That's great. So you're even taking your live event further by being able to record it and put it back afterwards too.
Exactly.
So Amy, how about you guys with Informa?
So for us, for future business critical things, that from my marketing perspective, we're really looking at the value that we have received actually through the virtual events. So some people may say that there wasn't a lot of revenue, or not nearly as much revenue behind virtual events, right, as we would normally have for a physical event. But the commercial value that we found behind these events was substantial. We have some record numbers, between anywhere from 30 to 50% of people who registered for some of these events that we didn't have in our databases previously, based on the type of market they were in. And so for us, I mean, the value that we now have is a well increased audience for future marketing behind any products that we put out there, right? And for us right now, it's diversification of types of products. So that we're not just a trade show organizer at this point. I mean, we're really looking at being a content producer, being a content provider, and a data-driven organization. So for us, the marketing elements that were received, I guess, off of the digital events that we produced this last year really changed the landscape of what we're going to be able to do with our business going forward into 24 right now.
That new audience growth is substantial. I mean, it's amazing what digital can unlock for opportunities as far as beyond the regions we typically serve.
Absolutely. And for us, it was amazing to get comments from people who either never came to events before because of the physical limitations, right? Which then bodes very well for the concept of hybrid events going forward. So that we continue to maintain, those opportunities with people, or people who just previously weren't willing to make the investment, who are now committed to investing and coming to one of our physical events going forward.
That's awesome. And Jess, so on your side too, you've got the media arm and the event side. So I'm sure content plays a big role in what you're working on as well. Oops, Jess, I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. So I think, yeah, that's very true. So going into the pandemic, that was helpful for us to already have that established media arm and 365 engagement with our audience. So we did shift into leaning more heavily on that versus the event. Going through that, I think the big thing for us that this is kind of brought to head is that, it's really, we've always talked about just the quality versus quantity conversation of leads that you're giving your exhibitors on the floor and who is attending your events. And I think this really kind of expedited that conversation. On the exhibitor side, you used to be able to just capitalize on, their high at the end of the event, get them to re-sign for next year before they've really dug into like their leads that they got. Now our exhibitors are wanting more information about who's viewing my listing online, who, tell me more about their demographics. I don't just want their contact information. And that all of that is happening real time. And so it's putting a little bit more focus, on our end to make sure that we're delivering quality leads, not just quantity. It's not just about full aisles on the trade show floor anymore. Because a lot of times in the virtual event or the digital event, you can't even tell how many people are there right then. It's all about the data. So we're digging in a lot more and making sure on every level that we're providing really quality attendees at our events.
So I want to give the data point and sort of what you're providing for customers, but the interesting piece on ROI, and I think as a whole, what I've heard across the industry and experienced myself too, is that the ROI is much different in a digital experience, right? So like you said, it's not the quantity, it's the quality. And I'm curious for the panel, have you had to reset exhibitor expectations? And if so, what did you do to help sort of get them thinking along the lines of quality and maybe a smaller audience, but maybe more qualified? Do you want to take it, Jess?
Yeah. So one thing that I think the education piece has been huge. Just in here's what digital is, here's what you can expect. Don't just sit, and expect people to come to you. You need to go out and, start doing your marketing and your sales outreach. So that has been definitely a hurdle getting to that point, but also really just setting those expectations and trying to explain, what is considered success. And, on our team, having our sales team trying to find out from our exhibitors and sponsors, how do they define success? Is it, I sell, I just need 3 leads to sell some extraction equipment to, and I'm good for the whole year? Or is it, no, I really need, I manufacture CBD, so I need some sort of, I need hundreds to make this worth the investment. So those conversations are definitely more critical right now, so that we can set those expectations of how digital is going to work for them and what type of presence they need at the event.
Right, because there's a lot of new opportunities with digital and what presence they could have too. So Amy, I know Informa has just signed an amazing contract with SwapCard, right? So to become the third-party platform for you. So that's a big opportunity for your audience to drive deeper connections to buyers and sellers. So tell us about, how are you working around ROI for sponsors and getting them on board with products like SwapCard?
So I actually want to piggyback on something that Jess said first, which is we talk about the education of the exhibitors or sponsors, right? But I think part of that also for us was a learning curve and a learning opportunity within Informa, because when this all began, the mentality, I think, across all of our industry was just pivot everything to an online event. Obviously, John's point is that they knew that wasn't going to work for their audience, so they went a different direction. And so this was definitely a learning curve and learning opportunity for us with Informa, because there are some markets that were very willing to, and they're early adopters, right, who were very much interested in it. And then other markets that we have where it's now, we went ahead and moved forward with a virtual trade show and virtual education, and it was not well received. So the opportunities are different based on the different market and the needs. And so Swap Card's great for us because it does allow for different levels of engagement. When we converted one of our shows in the agriculture sector, we tried to have 600 exhibitors participate, right? So the likelihood of making a connection in an audience and the size of that magnitude in the environment that we originally posted, which was not through Swap Card originally, it just was not engaging enough. So having a platform like that and being able to create communities in a different way is very meaningful, especially based on the uniqueness of the very different markets that we have within Informa North America. So I think that the number one thing that we learned is figuring out what the specific audience is for each market, what their needs are, and then being able to facilitate an event that meets those needs. And then in terms of leads that we share, I know that was something that was of interest, right? Is what kind of information do we share back? And that also is dependent upon what type of event a sponsor is participating in, right? So if it's a webinar where it's sponsored content, that would be a little bit different in terms of what we share with people and the sponsor. I mean, they would get more information about the participants. Obviously, participants have to opt in to be willing to share their information. And if someone comes to your booth and actually says, yes, I'm interested in information, then it would be much like a transaction of them coming to your booth where we do share contact information. But for other areas, it's more about demographics and general concepts, and then we can work with them on extension of opportunities in other programs after that, based on their needs and their interests of certain demographics.
It's interesting what you're saying too, because now we have all of this right at our fingertips, right? So we've got much more that we can play back, to your point, Jess, immediately, and we can make decisions and let the customers know how things are working, or pivot, right, where things aren't working as well. And I think that's a big piece of the new marketing role as we go forward. So let's talk about data. And it's always a bit of marketer's question, like, how much do we ask? How much is too much? When do we ask it? Where do we ask it? And I'll tell you, when we first started doing digital events, we're like, oh, no, make it as easy as possible. That's the way to do it. Let them go right in. And then we're like, what are we doing? We are losing an opportunity to really connect and learn and then watch their behavior. So tell me about how you're working with your teams. And I'll start with you, John. How are you working to determine what kind of information you're collecting? And then what are you using it for your next step in marketing once you've learned the information?
Well, the ironic thing about all this with COVID is that we actually have 3 monthly print magazines, and who knew that print would help save the day, that you actually have revenue coming in, you have advertisers, and with our markets, our advertisers couldn't get into hospitals to see their customers. So they had to look at different creative ways to reach their audience. So we were able to come up with and pivot with some other unique digital ways with podcasts and things, but we already had the data from our users, of the readers, to go by. So like with our shows, we knew who to really invite and get the key decision makers to the shows, because as we say, do you want 4 quarters or do you want 100 pennies? So they were able to get really good decision makers at the show and talk to them. And the level of expectation has been reset. I mean, when you haven't seen your customer in a year and you do a live event and you get to be in a room with even half of what was normal, they're ecstatic. So that's been different, certainly post-COVID.
I think that's great. I think returning to live is going to be key. People want to connect, right? So Jess, over to you about what are you collecting and what are you asking? Anything different than you've asked before, or how you use it?
Yeah, so we definitely have been, with the mindset of in registration, ask as little as you absolutely have to get them through, convert them as quickly as possible. And I don't think that necessarily changes because, as like just our general consumer behavior, we want we need to go order that thing on Amazon and we need to do it really quickly. So we're still thinking a lot in those terms, but, to what you were alluding to, Liz, like data is a commodity. And now we have, but where before with our trade shows in person, a lot of shows couldn't do the beacon technology or other things to really figure out heat mapping and what are behavior on site. We just had basic lead retrieval and scanning. So now with having this digital component as well, we're finding that there are a lot of other ways to get at that behavioral data in a much more cost-effective and honestly efficient way. So now we're taking, behavioral data, not just from our editorial sites and how they're interacting with that content, but now we're looking at, okay, so how are they interacting with the content in a digital environment? And then we're peppering in lots of survey questions in other ways. So when we're actually just finishing up building, our registration site for 2021, and a lot of the conversation was, okay, here's all the questions we want to ask or we need to ask. Which ones have to be here? Which ones could go in other places? Can we get at them through, while they're interacting online or the mobile app or a pre-show survey? I mean, this isn't, new information really or new tactics, but I think now that our audiences are so comfortable being in an online format, we're getting better data back. Whereas before, surveys, it was hard to get that information back from people. So that's now we're having a lot more to work with, and we're marrying that and trying to focus on what does that look like against our publishing data, and really creating like more robust, complete, comprehensive user profiles in our database for anyone who interacts with us throughout the year.
It's amazing too, because I feel like the more you learn about a customer, you can actually personalize their experience. And when you do it well, they're going to give you more. They're going to tell you more because what the value you're providing is so much greater. And I think that's also true as far as driving the right kinds of connections. So as you're building your persona of your customer or what they're interested in, you can then make recommendations for supplier conversations or content or products, which becomes very powerful for an event organizer to do.
Yeah, I think, I heard someone once told me that people don't dislike advertising, they dislike bad advertising. So if you can get targeted and you can give them what they want, there's a lot of value in that. And then their overall loyalty and experience and how they feel about your brand, then goes up. So everybody wins.
This is like the perfect point where it's less is more, like more of the right people, the right messaging. And to John, you deliver the quarters and not the pennies on that piece, So Amy, can you talk to us a little bit about how you're using data, and is there a system? Like, I think that's something we run into as a whole. I know my group has for sure, is we're capturing a lot of data from a lot of places, and it's like, where does it all aggregate that makes it usable? So can you talk about what you've been doing around data and collection?
Sure. So one of the things that Jess actually talked about is something similar to what we're doing with Informa. And we do have data points coming in from all different places. As you can imagine, we've got content sites where we have behavioral information available. We have registration sites where we're capturing those registrations. We have the event sites where people may be going. So right now we're in the process of implementing CDPs, a customer database platform, where we can aggregate all that information and then be able to actually see the real big picture of the customers and build personas, but really have a individualized, personalized experience for the users that engage with us in some form or fashion. One of the reasons that the data is so interesting is when we talk about who's coming to our events, we may get people who come to our events that are new to us, and we learn about them as they register for the show. But in the case of people who have content sites, I hear a lot of people talk about the fact that they don't even know half the audience that comes to their site. They don't have them in a database. So part of the benefit that we're going to see from the new systems that we're implementing, from behavioral tracking and their new customer database platform, will enable us to actually figure out who some of that audience is that we engage with online already, and use that information to be able to bring them into, take them from the top of the funnel all the way down to really then customize that experience that we have with them before they're officially a customer with us. Because similar situation to everyone, I suspect. We have some groups who ask very minimal information of people to get them to register. And then, pre-COVID, you had people with registration pages that went on and on and on and on. And I was like, I'm not even registering for your show and I work here because I don't want to tell you what my social security number is, right? So it's amazing to me how things have really pivoted. And I think that just as Jess was saying, if we can better understand what the customer's doing, how they're engaging with us, we can create a much better experience for them overall.
Yeah, engagement's going to be the key for all of us, I feel like, as we go forward. It's not just lots of people, it's the right people doing the right actions that make those meaningful connections. And I think that's what the power of all this is kind of unlocking. So John, you had talked about, when we were preparing for this panel, you had talked about sort of the way your sales and marketing teams work together to capture customer insight. Can you share a little bit more around that? Because I thought it was really great to talk about the conversations as well.
Yeah, so we don't have like quote marketing teams. Our sales teams, or I guess, are our marketing teams, because they're constantly, with the relationships they've built with our advertisers and clients, asking them what they're doing currently, what are they missing, and we really had to get creative with some of the ways that they can reach our audiences. So one of the things that we implemented were product demos at our shows. So we would have a separate meeting room. We would sell a sales pitch to a company, and they were thrilled to do it. We would do QR codes, so it's touchless surveys. We would share that information from the survey with the product demo, and that was just another creative way to get that lead. And the only way we knew about doing that was from talking to our customers about, okay, what can you do to help us in a different creative way reach these audiences that you have? So that was just one example of doing that.
And I think that's great, because a lot of this hinges from, do we know what customers want and how can we serve them better? So you got a great answer right there. And I think depending on the size of your organization, you can do conversations, you can do customer data platforms. It kind of all fits the range. So Amy, a question came in for you actually. So what is the customer database platform that you're working with?
So one of the groups that we have is more advanced than some of the others. And the one that's being used already and rolled out is through OneCount. However, there will be a larger global agreement that's being implemented across a large amount of Informa products, not just Informa Markets, but other Informa divisions. And I can't disclose who that is yet because they're in the process of working on a master service agreement right now, but that should come out probably in the next month. So look out for, I'm sure, an announcement on that, but unfortunately I can't disclose who that vendor is right now.
Okay, I hope that answers. That's great. Thank you. And we're doing it at Clarion as well. We're starting to work with treasure data. So that's new for us as well, but it's allowing us, and the reason we're doing it is to get us more visualization around all the different data access points, because that's been one of the hardest things we've had to sort of uncover. Is we get bits from different places, but how do you string it together to sort of tell your story and segment better? So you talked at the beginning, guys, about your marketing teams, and it's been really interesting over the last year how much data has sort of changed the way marketers, generalists are working in the business. So when you look about going back to 2021 and going back to live and your team structure, you've talked about top of funnel, you've talked about data analysts. Tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking for your teams and how you're seeing the roles evolve in your group. So Jess, I'll start with you on that one. Oh, Jess, I don't think we can hear you.
Back in now? Is it okay?
All
right. I don't know what's happening, guys. Sorry about that. So we are moving from marketing generalists to kind of the customer journey and making sure that we have that entire cycle covered in depth with specialists. So, having more focus on audience development, more focus on ticket conversion. That is our, highest priced product at the end of the day. So for us, that is, what our goal is, get them in through, maybe free products and work them down to, the paid. So we're focusing on that. And then Then separately breaking out the client side, something for us that is kind of unique is that the cannabis industry looks really different now than it did in 2019. New states are legalizing all the time. And even we had Mexico that legalized last year. So there's a lot happening there, and there's a lot of new entrants. So for us, we expect that to be a huge focus and an area where there's a lot that we can capitalize on. So making sure that we have the dedicated resources to do that has been kind of front of mind.
And I'm curious around sort of team and audience development. And we didn't prep for this question, so I'll put it out there. But there's been so much change in a lot of our industries with turnover or layoffs or furloughs. So how are you addressing data that you have today currently, and is it fresh? And do you have the right information to capture those people you want to build into your audience development plans?
So I'll jump in. I don't mind. So it's funny, Scott's going to laugh at this because a little while back we had a meeting with some of the top marketers and data folks within the North America. And I asked a question that I hadn't had people prepare for, but was exactly what you were asking about. How do you feel the quality of the data you have right now is? And ironically, one of the gentlemen started off by giving an analogy as to, well, I wouldn't say we're in the hospital yet, but we're probably in the ambulance on the way there. And then we had another marketer who said, well, somebody said, well, my list is aging out. And another marketer said, my list is actually aged and dying. And it wasn't the quantity, the people, but literally the people in that market are aged and they don't have the next generation to replenish it. So, we have a wide variety of places people are at in terms of the quality of data and the quantity, the people that are in there. And sadly, we were able to provide analogies that were quite in line with where we're at with COVID. So right now we're in a place where we are having to replenish data and replenish who's in the database and the quality of it. But I think that this has been a great time for that to happen, quite frankly, right? Because oftentimes if somebody has an event that runs once a year, twice a year, you're finding out 6 months in advance that your data is no longer good, or you're trying to market to an audience who's either timed out or you haven't had engagement with them. So then you have email deliverability issues, that sort of thing. So this has been really good for everybody, I think, because you're trying to engage with people more frequently in this current environment than we would have previously. And I think that that's helping to keep the quality of the data fresh and the engagements that you have fresh with people, so that you're not coming around and knocking on their door once a year to try to sell them something or get them to sign up for something. So I think we've all seen some positive changes to how we view our data and how we're able to continuously improve it throughout the course of the year.
It's great too, because digital does give us that year-round presence. So it's not just saying, hey, register again for our event. And like you had said earlier, 30 to 50% new audience you're getting from some of these places. It does help us build that database back up, where you may have some folks who are falling away as well. John and Jess, any other comments on how you're keeping data fresh or what you're looking at for cleaning?
Yeah, I think one of the things we did during COVID is we actually launched, which we like to do every year and a half. We launched a new product, which was a recruiting service within our industry, and that was nice because we did get some fresh, new, I guess, readers and users and potential attendees to come to this new recruiting site. So we quickly built up that database. But the other thing we did is we, like anything in any industry, there's an aging population. We have a lot of people retiring in our industry, and there aren't as many people replacing them. So we've kind of started a splinter young professionals group. And so we actually have separate networking events for them at our events. I'm not allowed to enter this meeting, but I just have to pay for it. But it's a really neat way to get new people that are the younger generation to kind of band together and kind of start this, generation 2, if you will, for our industry at least. And it's been a really big hit to get them kind of involved and start, a new crop, if you will.
That's great. And you build them at the advocacy level right when they come into your event and your product, so you can take them all through their career, which is awesome.
Well, yeah, that's the hope. Yeah.
Jess, anything different from your side? Oh, we
Just
got
you're
him.
on mute.
No, it's like when I first started talking. Sorry, guys. So we've always done re-engagement campaigns pretty frequently. Just the nature of our industry, there's a lot of churn in there, changing positions, coming in, going out of the industry. But most of our focus is on making sure that the new data coming in is usable data now, not trying to do a plan for like 3 years down the road. We're trying to ask the questions that we need to know to be able to either, convert them to a product or to sell them into sponsorship or advertising this year. Because I think that what we've seen and what we've learned is that, a year from now, things could look really different. So really just focused on usable, actionable data for the new folks coming in at this point.
That's great. So we're getting a lot of questions in now about the return to live, which I think is fantastic. So I was reading a post last night that Marco Giberte posted, and he called it the worlds of live and digital blending together. He called it phygital, which I thought was very clever. As you think about returning to live, you've got more data, you've got some new audiences. Really, what is important for you and your organization to think about now that you've got access to new customers? So where are you taking this as you get back to the live experiences? Jess, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can start. So I think with the digital component of a hybrid event, first of all, that could be a lot of your attendees' first touch point with your brand. So I think making sure that they have a good experience so that eventually they do want to come to the live event is really important. But there's going to be a big education piece as to what to expect on a lot of levels. It's from how do you interact with the digital and then cross platforms? It's going to be how safe do you feel at the event and what are you doing? I think there is a perception piece that goes with that too, to make sure that, everyone feels safe, not just, that you're doing all the things and you're saying, it's like, are we seeing things being cleaned every hour? And that'll be really important to get in front of with your audiences.
So let me go through a couple of questions that are coming in. So I'm going to bring this one to you, Amy. As we get back to live events, what other opportunities and offerings are there for attendees and exhibitors if we offer hybrid? So are you guys talking about hybrid in your markets?
Very much so, right? So for us, it's an expansion of opportunities that are outside of just events. So for us, we're using this, what we've learned in the last year as opportunities to pivot our business. So we're not just an events organization any longer, right? So we, in a variety of markets where we weren't a content provider previously, we will be content providers going forward. We will have data products available to people who would have previously just been an exhibitor or just been an advertiser. So we're finding different ways for our customers to engage with the people they want to reach through data or digital offerings. So, and some of that is hybrid events. And it may be that some of it's just through physical events, but we know that there are going to be opportunities for people in either location. So if an event previously may have been just a trade show, right? We're doing things similar to what John's done, where you're going to have video that would then be used after the fact. Or there are events that were previously just conferences, which now have the ability to expand into more of a online trade show component to it. So, but we're also really focusing a lot on what can we do for data and digital product growth within the organization so that we do have a variety of offerings for our customers that are outside of just the events area.
I think that's what's so amazing is we have so many more products now we can offer. It's not just that face-to-face experience. We're doing a similar thing at Clarion where we're focused more on how do we make connections. And it could be as far as we help people have match meetings before a show. And then when they come face-to-face, it's a much more meaningful conversation. So I think, like you're saying, a lot of the product development is coming out of what the digital experience was for us all last year.
Absolutely.
So John, go ahead, John.
Sorry. Yeah, well, I was going to add one of the things we did. We had a small regional meeting in Nashville in December, and it was right in the middle of the Thanksgiving, holiday spike. So our attendance kind of dwindled pretty much overnight, but the exhibitors still came because they were desperate to see anyone. So what we decided to do was make our webinars live during the actual presentations at the show. So at least those people could join online and interact with the speaker and ask questions and still be there. And then we grab that information, of course, that data and that content from the attendee, and then share that with a sponsor. Then we also, just last week in Dallas, we had a lot of Facebook Live videos that could interact with some of the people that are attending online. So that was something else that was pretty popular.
That's great. So you're meeting the customer where they're at, which is fantastic.
Right.
So I'm going to bring this next question to you as well, since you just had a very successful live event. So as you head back to the in-person events, how are you reimagining the on-site experiences? So things like reg lines, lunch lines, room seating, networking. So John, what did you do in the last event you ran a couple weeks ago?
Well, we had about 600 people in Dallas, which to us was a huge success, but it's about 60% of what we normally have. There was a lot of uncertainty because this was the first event a lot of people came to for the first time, so they didn't really know what to expect. The safe and clean procedures and protocols are blasted all over our websites to give them a peace of mind, so they know when they show up that we've got everything in place, the hotel's got everything in place, that they've got the sanitizers and they're cleaning the rooms after each presentation and all of that. And it was really, the uncertainty quickly was lifted and they felt comfortable being there once they got on site and saw that, oh, the hotel's open and there are things in place. And sometimes you get caught up in the news every day and you don't think people are doing those things outside, but they actually are. The restaurants were open and you know, the lobby bar was packed again and everything was great. One thing I don't understand are all the hotels must have banded together and said, let's charge $125 for an attendant to be at every single solitary water station, wrapped granola bars, food, and that's just, they're passing it on to the show planner. So that was an interesting piece that they're doing now.
Okay, well, that's good for us, so I'll look out for. So, okay, another question coming in. So I'm going to go to Jess on this one. With the ability to collect so much data from digital, how are you deciding what insights should be prioritized to inform your decisions? That's a big one, right? There's a lot we can now use, but how are you focusing on that?
Yeah, there is a lot, and you can't, you know, try and tackle everything at one time. So we're prioritizing based on our client side first right now, you know, and looking at who are our core audience segments and working backwards from there. So we're saying, you know, what main product categories are on the show floor, what audiences are needed around there, and then what are the key demographics that go around that. So, you know, there are a lot of different ways to slice and dice this, but that's the way that we've decided to start, because that doesn't just help the show, that's also really usable and actionable data on our media side as well. So it crosses both kind of channels, and we find that to be, you know, the most helpful for right now.
Amy and John, any other feedback on that one?
So for us, I would say that the data points really vary based on the market that we're, you know, each marketer sitting in. One of the things that we have said is important to us is don't ask anything that you're not planning on using, right? So the concept of I'm going to ask them 46 questions, but I really only know I'm going to do something with 5 of them. Don't bother asking for it right now, right? But ironically, I know it sounds weird, but the basic stuff of age and location still continue to be really important to a lot of our industries, just because of the regionality behind certain products that our exhibitors have, and whether they're sold through a distributor versus a manufacturer, that kind of thing. So those tend to be, you know, very similar, but each one of the markets have different needs. And so what we're doing is we're just trying to make sure that if you have multiple products in a particular portfolio in a particular market, at least that those are aligned, and that way the data can be scrubbed and cleaned, so that when we do move into all of the groups into the new CDP environment, at least we've got clean data that way.
Yeah, that's really smart. One of the things that we've been doing too is watching not only what we're asking people to provide us, but watching the behavior. So is there an intent to purchase? So we're starting to get smarter with how we can use that and say, oh, you know what, maybe we should reach out and say, can we help you schedule a meeting, right? Kind of taking it further towards that connection point, which has been great to see how digital can do that for us. So, okay, another one coming in. So thinking about the transition to live, how has data and insights from virtual changed the way you're planning for your live event? So maybe not just the marketing, but your in-person experiences. So are you learning things through customer behavior or connections digitally that you're now going to use to inform your on-site live show? John, I'll start with you on that one.
I guess one of the things we did at our show, well, prior to the show, is we did a lot of social media and email interaction, and we actually listened to what the readers and attendees were saying. So we listened, because the best way is to meet them before they get there with all of these things covered. So that was really interesting. We also did live video testimonials to kind of have people relieved while they were there, and kind of show them live what this event was like. So if people were questioning whether they could come or not, that was really valuable to us to share that with the people online. And just, again, listening to what the attendees want before you get there was valuable.
That's great. I think the customer insight piece is big to inform the decision for sure. Jess, what about you guys? Anything you're learning digitally that you're going to apply to live?
So I think the obvious one is that we've gotten a lot more insight on content, because it's not just what session did you attend. There's so many other data points that show what topics are of interest to you. And so that will definitely carry over. Also somewhat related to that, we've always been a little more cautious on what we allow our sponsors to engage in with content sponsorships. And making sure that we maintain the credibility of our brand and our media arm. And that's really has been a differentiator for us, because we do plan all of our own content and it is not sponsored. When we went into digital, we said, okay, like most of the sponsorships that have the most ROI are around content in a digital environment, which is very different than an in-person. You can't, that big banner, doesn't quite do the same. So, and experiential sponsorships are also more challenging online. So we did open up in the digital environment for the first time sponsored content. We kept it very separately branded from our content. And I think with an audience, if they know what they're getting, if they know it's a product pitch or a demo, they're not upset about it. It's when you try and pass that off as, education, that's more, agnostic, that's when they get upset. So for us, it was very successful. Our exhibitors surprised us and they brought really solid content that was very well prepared. So we're looking at ways to bring those types of sponsorships to the in-person, and whether it be pre-recorded or streaming online, connected to the digital audience as well.
That's a good point on the sponsor content for sure, because you don't want to be sold a pitch by any means, right? It's interesting. So we've been doing a lot with the demos to product demonstrations, and we've learned that they've worked so well digitally. We're going to sell more of those live on site and capture them live at the booth, so you have that buzz of the trade show behind you, and then package it back up digitally after the show. So learning from our side as well. Don has a great question. So I'm really curious in this one. So with data being more important than ever, how are we doing data collection during live in-person shows, especially now that many people and organizers are opting out of the traditional printed name badges? So Amy, I'll start with you on that one.
Well, so in terms of data collection, for us anyway, I mean, the data collection, regardless of printed or not, would still, the transaction would still take place if someone registers for our event. One of the other ways that from a physical standpoint and customers gaining data for ease of customers, we were looking at, we're going to be implementing badgeless options. And I can't speak to the technology just yet. It's still being sorted out. But we will be rolling out with badgeless events starting in just a few months from now. But there are other things that we are implementing in terms of data collection at physical events for some of our markets, which some already had implemented this, which is geofencing at events. So tying the mobile device, the individual device, to somebody who had already engaged with us, and the ability to do geofencing and then be able to deliver targeted messaging to people based on where they're at, not just prior to coming to the event, but when they're physically at the event. So we have a couple of shows that are a couple million square feet. And so the capability of being able to implement that geofencing and deliver targeted messaging to them based on where they're physically at, on the show grounds makes a difference in terms of how we engage with them at live events. QR codes were sort of on the way out, if you will, prior to COVID. And then they made this huge resurgence just when you go to a restaurant now, right? You get out your phone, you open your camera, and then bam, you've got your menu right there on your phone. I think that that's something that we're going to see make a big reappearance at live events going forward, is the idea of QR codes. We have a couple of shows that they're B2B, but they're considered B2C. By the people who attend, and they don't want to give you any of their information, right? And so we're seeing this COVID, quite frankly, is a perfect opportunity for us to change that registration or their experience in coming to the event, and thinking more along B2B than B2C, because hey, we need everyone's contact information in some form or fashion in case, God forbid, there's an issue because of COVID, right? But being able to, as opposed to putting them through a full registration process, just use a QR code. It's really easy. They don't have to think hard about it, right? And you're not putting them through a huge reg system. So there's some technology that's basic and easy that doesn't cost hardly any money at all to implement. I think we're gonna, we'll see as show organizers, we would be using more. Some of our exhibitors are gonna be using a little bit more. And then some newer technology, beacon technology is very expensive. And so there's other ways around beacon technology like geofencing, things like that, that can still capture data for the show organizers and your customers that I think we're gonna start seeing more emerging and less expensive going forward.
John or Jess, anything different with this question?
I'll just add to kind of what Amy was going with, like QR codes. I've been very pleasantly surprised at how far that technology has come since, a few years ago. We're also looking at going more paperless for the show for this year. And I'm hoping this is one of those things that sticks. I would love to get rid of all paper at the show. So we are doing a lot more with QR codes. And I think on the data point specifically, if all of the information that they normally get on site in a printed format is now for them to download, whether it be in a mobile app or somewhere else, there's a lot more opportunity to get that data from them, just either from behavioral kind of behind the scenes tracking, or, answer this one question to download this fill in the blank, this special offer, because now it's more integrated, I think, in our daily lives, being online while we're in person somewhere, like the restaurant example. It's, it used to be so taboo to have your phone out at the table, and now you have to. So that I think we're going to see a lot more of, that there are other ways to get at the information than just registration.
Yeah, this is the year to try it. If there's something digital, try and see what sticks, for sure. And we're doing the same thing. We're using a lot more with mobile geofencing. That's the way we're going to also, for ourselves as organizers, understand flow in people and who's talking to whom, which hopefully will help us make better connections after an event. So we're coming right up on the hour. I just want to open up and say, are there any more questions? You can come off mute and ask, or you can put them in the chat. Okay, well, I really appreciate your very candid insights. Data can be a really tricky subject to navigate, and I'm hoping everyone on the panel today and listening to us found a couple of takeaways to bring back to your teams. I think we're doing a survey afterwards, so please be sure to give your feedback. Our focus is to ensure that the marketing SIG really provides valuable working information, and we're addressing some of the harder to navigate topics in the industry that we're all facing. So thank you to our amazing panelists, Jess, Amy, and John, and thank you to David and Anna for your support and organization for today. And I'll turn it over to David.
Thanks, Liz. And again, thank you, the rest of the panel. We did record this session, so we will add it to the library on the SISO.org website in the next couple of days. So if you've got colleagues that were unable to attend today and wish to listen to it, it will be made available there. And as Liz said, we will continue to put out more information about the activities going forward with the marketing SIG as it continues to grow. Have a great rest of the day and look forward to seeing you all again in person, hopefully soon.